Sometimes when I read a newspaper, I find that there is a lot of stories, reports that I want to comment on. One of the things I have tried to do with having this YouTube channel is to voice my views on a very wide range of issues, and that's what I'm going to do now. I probably should slow down a little bit. I've got over 700 videos now, and I'm aware that some videos may be similar to one another, so at some point I'm going to edit it and maybe delete videos that are a bit repetitive. But this issue I'm going to talk about is something that I've got very strong views about, and that is the subject of human rights. So I'm just going to read out the report, or at least bits of it. I'm not going to read the whole thing simply because it's too long, but I'll let you know that it's in the London Times today, the 16th of December 2014. So if you subscribe to the Times or you want to hear the full report, you can find it there, but I'm sure there will be other sources. So I'm just going to read this directly and then comment about it afterwards. A Chinese couple whose son was executed 18 years ago for a murder he did not commit have been awarded £3,000 comfort money for a life cut short by a forced confession and false evidence. Just interrupt myself there. £3,000, that's just for the benefit of British readers to get an idea of how much that is. In Chinese RMB that would be about, unless I'm mistaken, 300,000 RMB, unless I'm mistaken. The sum offered to the tearful parents follows a rare retrial in the justice system that has a conviction rate of 99%, executes more people than any other country, has barely any independence from the communist authorities, and almost never admits mistakes. The attempt by officials at the Inner Mongolia Higher People's Court to right one of its most notorious wrongs comes as part of a bid by President Xi Jinping to lift the public's dismal perception of the judicial system. A propaganda campaign has battled to convince ordinary Chinese that they live under the rule of law, but still has a long way to go in addressing that. Even by Chinese standards, the 1996 conviction of Hu Jiltu, I don't know the correct pronunciation of the young man's name, an 18-year-old tobacco factory worker, was unusually dubious. He and a friend had been walking past a textile factory in Hohhot, that's a city I'm not quite sure how to pronounce, when he heard someone crying out from the lavatory building. The pair found a woman's body inside. Knowing that the justice system routinely heaped suspicion on the first person to contact police, they wavered over whether or not to inform the authorities. Hu Jiltu talked his friend around and went to the police. At the police station he was subjected to 48 hours of interrogation, from which he confessed to the woman's rape and murder were extracted, and 61 days later Hu Jiltu was executed. The boy's family fought for 10 years to prove his innocence, a battle that had no impact until 2005, when the serial rapist and murderer Zhao Jihong admitted that he had carried out the attack. Despite that confession, it took another 9 years to formally re-examine Hu Jiltu's trial. The retrial revealed a catalogue of mistakes, the sort of injustices and use of flimsy evidence that many Chinese believe are repeated every day. The court said that the details of Hu Jiltu's confession had matched neither the autopsy report nor other evidence from the scene. DNA evidence also failed to connect him to the crime. The Inner Mongolia Higher People's Court finds Hu Jiltu's original guilty verdict is not consistent with the facts, and there is insufficient evidence, said a statement from the court. It confirmed that heartbreaking lessons had been learned. China's wider push to generate confidence in the judicial system has recently thrown up a handful of retrials. In a few cases, men who have spent between 17 and 21 years in jail walk free after courts determined that their original convictions have been false. As part of the propaganda drive, Shanghai has just become the first city in China to establish a board that not only appoints judges and prosecutors, but has the power to punish them if they breach discipline, a reference to the corruption that riddles the justice system and the ease with which local officials can influence the outcome of cases. Legal scholars have denounced the Shanghai move as little more than window dressing for a system that will only have credibility when it gains independence from the government. Okay, so that's a disturbing case. A young man was executed for a crime he didn't commit. Now, what troubles me about this is that I know similar cases have happened in Western countries, in the United States and in the past in the UK, when we had the death penalty. We haven't had the death penalty for 50 years, but unquestionably there were examples of this happening. Now what troubles me about China is this is a country that has a far higher execution rate than anywhere else. It's actually more than all the other countries in the world combined that currently use the death penalty. So whilst there's certainly violent criminals among them, it's very conceivable that there will be miscarriages of justice going on, and this is very, very disturbing. And I think it needs to be explored to what extent that logic has changed, that the authorities will automatically suspect the first person to report to police. Now that's illogical when you think about it, because if they're guilty, why on earth would they go to the police? And it actually is a big problem, because it's denying justice to victims of crime as well, because witnesses are going to be frightened of going forward in case they get blamed. Now, I try to be objective with these things, although it makes me very angry. Anything to do with human rights really impacts me, but I will give Xi Jinping some credit for this anti-corruption drive, because I think that whilst there may be political moves going on within it, unquestionably there will be some positive outcomes from it, and if it does mean less corruption in the judicial system, that can only be a good thing. However, I agree with the analysis at the end from legal scholars that the system will always be corrupt so long as it's so closely tied to the Communist Party. Now, when you have a conviction rate of 99%, what that basically indicates is if they want you to be guilty, then you are guilty. And I suspect this may be to do with the Chinese logic of having a harmonious society. In other words, if a heinous crime has happened, if the police get conviction as soon as possible, it calms public anger. At least that might be their logic. But actually what it's doing is creating miscarriages of justice, and actually letting down the victims of the crime in the first place. So it's clearly a deeply flawed system, morally speaking, and it's deeply troubling. I mean, it's good that these cases are being re-examined, but China continues to execute possibly thousands of people every year. They don't say how many, but without doubt more than the rest of the world combined. And I've no doubt that a lot of those people are probably violent criminals, and I'm not going to get into a debate about the rights and wrongs of the death penalty, because in this video I'm talking specifically about miscarriages of justice. As for that amount, even though China is a developing country and £3,000 there is more than it would be here, that's still not a massive amount for a man's life. 300,000 RMB is a lot of money by Chinese standards, but I don't think it equates to a man's life. I've been to China. I know the sort of transfer of money, what that equates to, and it's really not enough. And it is an utter disgrace that it took 9 years, even after the real killer confessed. 9 years for this family to get justice. 9 years they were suffering. Well, I say 9 years they were suffering. I presume they've been suffering the whole time. If the Communist Party had any decency, they would apologise. They would apologise, because they control the legal system. It is their miscarriage of justice. If they had any human decency, they would apologise. Rather than just giving compensation, they would apologise and say, we were wrong, this was wrong. But I don't believe that they have the integrity to do that. I believe basically the CCP are cold-blooded and callous. I don't think they care. I think the only reason they're paying the family is because they're obsessed by stability in society. I don't think actually the Chinese Communist Party has any moral compass at all. I think they are a totalitarian regime that is absolutely driven by control, control, control. I don't think they have a moral compass, because when you have a situation where witnesses are frightened to go to the police in case they get accused, that shows what sort of a society communist China is. Yes, it's a quasi-system, quasi-capitalist system, and incidentally, this is not related, but incidentally yesterday it was reported that China is now officially the world's biggest economy. That's a huge thing, by the way, according to the IMF, but there's different sources for that. So The reason I mention that is because this is going to be a Chinese century. I think it is entirely legitimate that outsiders question things that happen in China. I know this is Chinese mentality of it's an internal affair, but human rights in my book is universal. And by the way, I would say the exact same thing for miscarriages of justice anywhere. There have been miscarriages of justice in my country. However, there is an important difference. In other countries, you don't have the same level of interference from the ruling government with the judicial system. I mean, the Chinese judicial system is basically controlled by the Communist Party. The same thing cannot be said in the United States. You cannot say that the American judicial system is controlled by the Democrats or the Republicans or the Independents. Likewise, in Britain, you cannot say it's controlled by the Conservatives or Labour. Yes, they're legislators, yes, they set laws, but so long as the Communist Party is that closely tied to the judicial system, so long as you have so much influence, then you're never going to have independent thinking. And in my opinion, Chinese judges aren't credible, because they're not going to be thinking for themselves. They're going to be thinking whatever the party line is. What I find disgraceful about this case is that even after the killer admitted it in 2005, it's taken till now, 9 years later, for the family to get any sort of compensation. So I think some positive steps are being made in this anti-corruption drive, and if that means a fairer justice system, that can only be a good thing. I would welcome that. But if the Communist Party had any decency, they would unreservedly apologise to this man's family, say, we were wrong, we cannot imagine the suffering you have gone through, none of our words are enough, we were wrong. But they're too damn arrogant to do that, and it makes me very angry. Because miscarriages of justice, not just in China, wherever they occur, are reprehensible. No one should spend years in jail or be executed by the state for something that they have not done. That is just, it's one of the worst things I can think of.